Russia says it's ready to move fast on a deal for peace in Ukraine. Overnight, Russia's defense ministry said it had downed 142 drones, including 27 over the Moscow region.
On July 20th, at 6 p.m. local time, Moscow faced an unprecedented challenge. A coordinated drone strike targeted the Russian capital, with Mayor Sobyanin reporting at least 21 drones attacking the city. The defense ministry, however, claimed to have shot down 93 drones, a figure that immediately raised questions about the actual scale of the assault and the effectiveness of Moscow's defenses. Despite official statements, the aftermath told a different story. Fires broke out across the city, key infrastructure sustained damage, and all three major airports, Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo, were forced to shut down, stranding thousands and disrupting Moscow's operations. The events of that evening put Russia's narrative to the test: the myth of Moscow's impenetrable air defenses. The image of Moscow's air defenses as unbreakable has long been a cornerstone of Russia's self-assured security narrative. Yet, the events of July 20th exposed a gap between myth and reality. Mayor Sobyanin said at least 21 drones hit Moscow, while the defense ministry claimed 93 shot down in total, 19 over the city, creating an immediate credibility gap. The defense ministry's statements projected an image of overwhelming success, emphasizing that advanced missile systems and electronic warfare measures had neutralized the threat before it could reach the capital. But the evidence on the ground told a different story. Within hours, the city's streets bore witness to the aftermath. Fires erupted in residential neighborhoods. Charred debris littered intersections. Video footage showed drones striking near the OKO business center, a prominent part of Moscow's financial district. In Kuntsevo, flashes and thick plumes of smoke rose over apartment blocks, contradicting official claims of comprehensive protection. Residential buildings suffered direct hits, and eyewitnesses documented the damage in real time. So, how did fires rage and drones strike key landmarks if nearly every UAV was supposedly destroyed? The contradiction between the official tally and the scale of destruction became impossible to ignore. Reports surfaced of vehicles burning and wreckage scattered across at least 7 districts. These incidents were not isolated. They indicated that multiple drones had slipped through the city's layered defenses. First-hand accounts from residents added to the growing skepticism. One taxi driver described seeing a sudden flash in the sky, followed by debris crashing down and a car collapsing nearby. Another resident, sheltering indoors, recalled a pervasive sense of vulnerability. There was a real feeling that the city was no longer protected. These personal stories, paired with physical evidence, suggested that the Russian government's narrative was incomplete at best. Moscow's defensive strategy relied on a combination of advanced missile platforms and sophisticated electronic warfare, systems specifically designed to counter aerial threats. Yet the swarm tactics employed by Ukraine overwhelmed these defenses. By launching drones simultaneously from multiple directions and using deceptive routes, Ukraine forced Russian systems to divide their attention and resources. The visible aftermath in Moscow pointed to a defensive network stretched beyond its limits, with some drones bypassing interception entirely. The disruption extended well beyond the immediate sites of impact. All 3 of Moscow's major airports, Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo, were forced to shut down operations in the wake of the strikes. Flights were delayed or cancelled for hours, stranding thousands of passengers. On July 20th alone, over 134 flights were affected, and since May, other outlets report more than 1,000 flight delays or cancellations linked to drone threats. These numbers highlight the vulnerability of Moscow's infrastructure and suggest that the city's defenses are not as robust as officials claim. The psychological impact was equally significant. Moscow has long cultivated an image of invulnerability, supported by the presence of high-tech defense systems like the Pantsir S-1. The attack on July 20th challenged this belief. The sight of burning vehicles, damaged buildings, and emergency crews responding to multiple locations undermined the city's aura of control. Videos and images circulated widely, despite efforts by authorities to so. Boris Tory managed the narrative, and the population's sense of security was fundamentally shaken. The myth of Moscow's impenetrable defences suffered a visible public blow. This disparity between official statements and observable reality raises fundamental questions about the effectiveness of Russia's air defense network. The July 20th drone attack demonstrated that even the most heavily guarded city can be reached, and that the perception of safety can be shattered in a single night. The damage was not only physical, but psychological, eroding confidence in the systems meant to guarantee protection. As the dust settled, Moscow's residents were left to confront the new reality. The belief in an untouchable capital had been punctured, replaced by uncertainty and doubt. The question now was not just how the city would recover, but how its people would process the events that unfolded in the early hours. What did it feel like to live through that night, when the myth of security gave way to chaos and fear? The night Moscow woke to panic and chaos. In the early hours of July 20th, Moscow's tightly controlled calm was shattered. Around 2:45 a.m., explosions echoed through the city as flashes of light streaked across the night sky. Within moments, smoke began to rise over multiple districts, signaling that the drone attack was not an isolated incident, but a coordinated strike. Residents, jolted awake, found themselves thrust into uncertainty as the reality of the assault became undeniable. For many, the experience was immediate and deeply personal. In the Kuntsevo district, a mother gathered her children and sheltered under the bed as the sound of drones buzzed overhead. In the morning, 3 cars were burning in the yard, she recalled, emphasizing how the violence had reached directly into the spaces where families once felt secure. The city's reputation for invulnerability gave way to a tangible sense of exposure. On the streets, those working the night shift faced the chaos head-on. Ivan P., a taxi driver near the Moscow Ring Road, described the sudden transition from routine to crisis. You see a flash in the sky, then some guy shouts, "Run! Drone!" Another second, a car nearby collapses. Debris flies. His account captured the speed and unpredictability of the attack, as ordinary commutes devolved into scenes of destruction. Fires broke out, vehicles were wrecked, and debris littered the roads, leaving neighborhoods transformed by the violence. By dawn, reports confirmed 7 affected districts, including Kuntsevo and Novoseltsy. The scale of the attack became clear as videos circulated online, showing burning vehicles near the OKO business center, one of Moscow's most prominent commercial landmarks, and drone debris scattered across sidewalks and streets. The impact was not limited to a single area. Instead, it spanned the city, forcing residents to confront the vulnerability of even Moscow's most protected neighborhoods. The city's meticulously maintained image, reinforced by constant surveillance and visible security measures, was abruptly contradicted by the widespread physical disruption. The psychological effects of the attacks were just as significant as the material damage. Residents accustomed to relying on Moscow's defenses now questioned their safety. The sense of distance from the front lines of the war in Ukraine collapsed as conflict arrived at their doorsteps. This breach of confidence was evident in first-hand accounts and in the atmosphere that lingered long after the explosions had faded. The contrast between official reassurances and the reality on the ground left many unsettled, highlighting a critical shift in public perception. Nighttime assaults intensified the impact. The attack struck when most of the population was asleep, amplifying confusion and fear. Families were forced from their beds into makeshift shelters, while the city's landmarks, symbols of its modernity and power, became targets. The smell of burning wreckage in the morning air was a stark reminder that the capital was not immune to the reach of modern warfare. The attacks were carefully timed to maximize their psychological effect, catching residents off guard and demonstrating the reach of Ukraine's tactics. Physical evidence contradicted the Russian government's claims of comprehensive interception. Streets in at least 7 districts showed signs of direct strikes or falling debris. Vehicles burned, infrastructure was damaged, and drone fragments lay scattered across the city. The official narrative, which asserted near total neutralization of the threat, could not mask the visible aftermath. This gap between government statements and observable reality further eroded public trust and exposed the limitations of Moscow's air defense systems. The disruption extended beyond residential areas. This was the first simultaneous shutdown of all 3 major Moscow airports since April 2024. The closure of Vnukovo, Domodedovo, and Sheremetyevo paralyzed air traffic, delayed over 100 flights, and left thousands of passengers stranded. The economic and logistical fallout from these shutdowns added another layer to the crisis, underscoring the strategic effectiveness of the attack. As the city surveyed the damage and processed the events of the night, the consequences rippled outward. The attacks not only punctured Moscow's image of security, but also exposed the vulnerabilities of its most critical infrastructure. The sudden paralysis of air travel, combined with the visible destruction in multiple districts, forced both officials and residents to reconsider what constituted safety in the capital. The events of July 20th set the stage for a deeper examination of how a coordinated drone strike could disrupt not just daily life, but the operational core of a city like Moscow. The strategic strike that grounded Moscow. Moscow's aviation system faced a calculated disruption designed to strike at its core. Ukraine's drone offensive on July 20th targeted the capital's busiest airports with precision, forcing the complete shutdown of Vnukovo, Sheremetyevo, and Domodedovo. In just one day, at least 134 flights were delayed or diverted. Over the course of the weekend, cumulative delays and cancellations at Moscow's airports surpassed 1,000. A staggering figure that reflects not only the scale of the operation, but also its strategic intent. These disruptions unfolded at the height of the tourist season, amplifying the logistical chaos for travelers and airlines alike. This was not an isolated incident. Since May, Moscow's airports have faced a persistent wave of drone-related closures. Domodedovo alone has logged more than 60 hours of downtime in the past 3 months. Sheremetyevo cancelled over 170 flights and delayed hundreds more in a single episode. The broader pattern is clear. Since the start of 2025, Ukraine's attacks have forced at least 217 airport closures across Russian territory, 4 times the number recorded in the previous year. The cumulative effect is a sustained assault on Russia's ability to maintain reliable air travel, with cascading impacts on logistics, business, and the daily routines of hundreds of thousands of people. The financial impact is immediate and far-reaching. Novaya Gazeta reported that airport closures in May alone cost Russia up to $12.78 million, with the July 20th strike likely adding several million more to that total. Airlines have cancelled around 1,000 flights since early May, and over 430 planes have been diverted to alternate airports. At least 200,000 passengers have been affected. Roughly 1 in every 10 air travellers in the region. The losses extend beyond airlines, hitting airport operators, ground services, and the wider travel sector. Despite these mounting costs, Russia's state aviation authority, Rosaviatsia, has refused to compensate airlines for delays or cancellations, forcing private companies to absorb the financial blow. This policy deepens the strain on the aviation industry and signals the government's prioritization of security over economic relief. Ukraine's deliberate airport targeting isn't a side effect. It's a core strategy designed to hammer Russia's economy and public morale. Each closure sends a message. The war is not contained to distant battlefields, but reaches the heart of Russia's capital. The psychological effect is amplified as images of crowded terminals, grounded aircraft, and stranded passengers circulate on social media and in news reports. The disruption to Moscow's airspace undermines the city's reputation as a secure, well-managed hub. For a government that emphasizes control and stability, the repeated paralysis of its airports is a visible vulnerability. The method behind these attacks reveals an evolving approach to conflict. Ukraine's use of drone swarms, launched from multiple directions and flying unpredictable routes, exposes the limitations of Russian air defense systems built to counter traditional threats. Low-cost, expendable UAVs force Russia to deploy expensive interceptors and jamming equipment, stretching resources thin. The persistence of these attacks means that even when defenses succeed in neutralizing individual drones, the cumulative effect is one of constant disruption. The result is a war of attrition, not only on the battlefield, but in the economy and in the public psyche. Tourism and commerce have suffered in tandem. Moscow, a major transit point for international travelers, has become unpredictable as flight schedules collapse and stopovers are rerouted. The July attack struck during peak travel months, turning what would typically be a period of profit into a season of uncertainty. The ripple effects extend beyond the city, affecting neighboring regions and diminishing Moscow's stature as a reliable gateway for business and tourism. Each airport closure is a marker of shifting tactics in modern warfare. Rather than inflicting damage solely through physical destruction, Ukraine's drone strategy wields economic disruption as a weapon. The visible consequences, abandoned terminals, delayed cargo, and frustrated travelers, signal a new dimension to conflict, one that challenges not only military defenses but also the foundations of daily life in Russia's capital. As the pattern of attacks continues, the question of sustainability emerges. Russia faces not only the challenge of defending its airspace, but also the growing economic and social costs of persistent disruption. The July 20th strike demonstrated the strategic effectiveness of this approach, raising doubts about how long Russia can absorb the mounting losses without a shift in tactics or policy. This evolving contest over Moscow's airspace points to a broader transformation underway in the nature of warfare itself. Drones, the new architects of war. Drones have become the central actors in shaping the modern battlefield. Ukraine's strike on Moscow illustrates how unmanned aerial vehicles, when guided by advanced tactics and strategic planning, can disrupt the core operations of even the most fortified cities. The July 20th attack was not an isolated incident, but a demonstration of how swarm tactics, multi-directional launches, and the use of false routes can bypass traditional air defenses and create operational paralysis. Swarm tactics rely on launching numerous drones simultaneously from various remote locations. This approach forces defenders to track multiple aerial targets at once, stretching their detection and interception capabilities. On July 20th, Ukrainian drones approached Moscow from several directions. Their unpredictable flight paths designed to overwhelm and confuse Russian air defense operators. By sending diversionary UAVs along false paths, Ukraine forced Russia to squander precious intercept resources, exhausting both personnel and hardware as they attempted to respond to every potential threat. This method of deception, paired with the sheer volume of incoming drones, exposed the vulnerability of even highly advanced defense networks. Russia's response was to deploy a combination of its most sophisticated stationary air defense systems, including the Pantsir S-1 and S-400 batteries, alongside electronic warfare measures such as pulse radio jamming and drone interceptors. These systems are engineered to counter high-speed missiles and manned aircraft, but on July 20th, they struggled against dozens of small, unpredictable drones. The S-400's radar and targeting capabilities, optimized for conventional threats, proved less effective when confronted with a swarm of compact UAVs flying erratic routes. The Pantsir S-1, designed for point defense, was rapidly saturated as it attempted to engage multiple targets at once. Electronic countermeasures, while effective in some cases, could not fully neutralize the threat posed by a coordinated multi-vector assault. The aftermath of the attack highlighted these defensive shortcomings. Footage from Moscow's residential and commercial districts showed drones impacting infrastructure, igniting vehicles, and scattering debris across major roads. The visible destruction contradicted official claims of near-total interception. Strikes near landmarks like the OKO Business Center and widespread reports of fires and damaged property provided evidence that the drone swarm had penetrated deep into the city's defenses. The physical impact was matched by a psychological one, as residents and officials alike confronted the reality that Moscow's airspace was no longer secure. The strategic use of false routes stands out as a defining innovation in this new phase of drone warfare. By programming some drones to take deliberately misleading paths, Ukraine forced Russian defenses to divide their attention and resources, intercepting decoys while other UAVs advanced toward their intended targets. This tactic disrupted the radar coverage and prioritization algorithms of systems like the Pantsir S-1, further reducing their effectiveness. The result was a significant degradation of Moscow's defensive posture at a fraction of the cost required to build and operate the city's air defense infrastructure. The implications of these tactics extend beyond the physical damage inflicted. Modern military doctrines, built around centralized and expensive defense systems, are being challenged by the adaptability and low cost of drone warfare. Ukraine's approach demonstrates that with the right combination of technology and strategy, smaller nations can impose significant costs and disruption on larger adversaries. The cost asymmetry is stark. Each Ukrainian drone represents a minimal investment compared to the expensive interceptors and jamming equipment required to counter them. This dynamic places sustained financial and operational pressure on Russia's defense apparatus. An anonymous source within Ukraine's Ministry of Defense summarized the broader significance. This is just the beginning. Drones are changing the global architecture of war. The statement reflects a reality that extends beyond Moscow or even the current conflict. As drones continue to evolve, so too will the methods used to deploy and counter them. The psychological impact on both civilians and military planners is profound, as the sense of security provided by advanced defenses is eroded by the persistent threat of low-cost, adaptable aerial attacks. The events of July 20th offer a clear view into the vulnerabilities that even the most fortified cities now face. The success of Ukraine's drone strategy signals a turning point in how conflicts are fought and defended against. As militaries around the world watch the skies above Moscow, the question is no longer whether drones will shape the future of warfare, but how nations will respond to a battlefield where traditional advantages can be neutralized by innovation and adaptability. The July 20th drone strikes on Moscow exposed a fundamental weakness in the city's air defenses, challenging the perception of Russian military dominance. Ukraine's use of cost-effective swarm tactics and deceptive routes allowed drones to penetrate the capital's protective network, demonstrating that even heavily fortified cities remain open to asymmetric strategies. As drone technology advances, the boundaries of traditional defense continue to shift, forcing military planners to reassess their approach to aerial threats. If you found this analysis insightful, hit subscribe and ring the bell for more deep dives into modern warfare's evolving landscape. Next time, we'll examine how Russia might adapt its air defenses. Could its next generation of systems finally neutralize drone swarms? Let us know your thoughts below.